just before we begin, I'd just like to, like it's customary in Australia, to acknowledge the elders of the traditional custodians of the land for which I'm hosting this session, which is the Wurundjeri people in Australia, Melbourne. I'd like to pay my respect to the elders, both past, present, and emerging. Like Tim has mentioned, we're running a panel session, and today's conversation is going to look around authentic assessment in remote learning. We're going to look at discussing best practices for design and also best practices for measuring success. My first question will go to begin the session, we'll start with Hamish. Hamish, how do you define authentic assessment, and how have institutions supported authentic assessment in remote learning?
Thanks, Chakwedi. Look, this is something that we've been struggling with for thousands of years, and I have to say for at least the last 100 years, universities, for the most part, haven't changed what they do at all. That all changed enormously around about January, February, March this year, depending on where you were, when most universities, if not all, decided to move themselves into the cloud. Some for this year, some until the middle of next year, some on a month-by-month basis. And what we've seen as a result is a huge amount of transformation. You know, for the last 20 years, I have been working to try and really not just improve assessment, but to overturn and reform assessment. Most practice is really bad. I have to say, including the assessment that I do in my courses, I could have been doing 100 years ago. What we've seen in the last couple of months is the emergence of what we have been defining for the last few years of next generation assessment. That is assessment that you don't even know you're having. Like, for example, right now I'm being assessed on my communication skills, I have no doubt. And that's exactly the sort of assessment that we need in universities. And finally, we see that the technology has caught up with the measurement science and the institutional need to really take forward proper forms of, as I say again, next generation assessment. And in that kind of assessment, we're seeing all sorts of creative definitions of what people need to learn and creative tasks, really innovative tasks that we're starting to develop, actually that can be collaborated on globally, just like our own work right now. And it's that kind of assessment and the prospects going forward, if we really transform practice, that takes us miles away from having lots of students sit in one single place and use paper, and then even upload that to a system, to really do things in much faster, better, cheaper, and many more exciting ways. So for me, authentic assessment is really just starting what we've had the chance to transform this year and take forward into the future. As I say again, next generation assessment. Have plenty of things that we've written on that and more coming out if you're interested in the details.
Perfect. I think I will look forward to looking and reviewing those resources when they're out. Stella, I want to just pose the same question to you, because I believe that different academics or experts see authentic assessment differently. And for you, in your context of Indonesia, how have the institutions you work in supported the process of designing authentic assessment for remote learning?
Well, the first, Chuck, remote learning in Indonesia has just started officially in 2018 by the launch of National Online Learning System that we call SPADA. So this is the new thing for Indonesia, and one of the pioneer, University of Pelita Harapan, has now already got the license for establishing the first study program fully online. So speaking about the authentic assessment in remote learning, it is quite challenging, but thank God we got the fully support from our institution. So let me categorize that in the three parts. The first one, in the academic support by the institution, they provide the curriculum framework. We do the standardized for graduate learning outcomes policies to maintain the quality assurance, even though we have to conduct this remote learning for assessment. The second one is from the perspective of technology. We developed the learning management system integrated with the plagiarism checker. And this time we are really supported just to make sure that our students can perform really well and have integrity in every assessment they have to conduct. And the third one, for the faculty and staff, we conduct a lot of weekly training just to make sure that our staff, our faculty members, is ready to upscale their competency in making the assessment, conducting the online classes, and so on. That's the perspective of our university, and I think we cannot generate it in Indonesia as well.
Oh, perfect. Thanks for sharing that. I think a core aspect of authentic assessment and supporting the process of authentic assessment is actually the design piece. So Dan, what are the main challenges to designing authentic assessment? And if you could share a little bit about your perspective on what the challenges you faced while designing authentic assessment, that would be really, really helpful. Dan.
Well, as I say that
Yeah,
this is the
okay.
Dan, the question.
Okay, I think the challenges that we have, I think there are two parts to it. One from the student perspective, and the other will be from the faculty. As Hamish has rightly mentioned just now, the traditional approach of teaching has been the same for the past 20,000 of years. And now when we go into authentic assessment, faculty may not be familiar. We may think we know, but at the ground level, for faculty from different schools, different departments, different courses, they may not be aware. And so there's a need to have what we call faculty development, to orientate them, to look into alternative form of assessment other than the traditional exam that is the outcome of the lectures and the tutorial sessions and the lab sessions. Now with authentic assessment, we got to relook on how students will be assessed, and then come up with the pedagogy that will support authentic assessment. If we do not do that, then what will happen is that we maintain the traditional style of delivery at this point in time, and then we go to authentic assessment. Then what will happen is that faculty may not be familiar, or they may have a mismatch of teaching methods that will have an outcome of the student not performing as expected. Why? Because the method of pedagogy and the remote assessment do not match. Right. So when we talk about remote assessment, we need to understand, okay, what do we actually want? What are the different methods whereby students are able to be remotely, either individually, where they are assessed on learning outcomes, as Hamish has mentioned, in the way they communicate, in the way they do problem solving, in the way conceive and think, critical thinking. At the same time, if part of authentic assessment, and it does include group work, then we need to orientate our students on what is expected for group work, what are the outcomes that we expect. For example, how they work as a team, how do they resolve conflict, as a group they will have conflict, how do they come together, how do they present as a group, how do they coordinate the presentation. And on the other hand, with faculty, we also need to orientate them on how to assess both individual work as well as group work. So there is a need to make sure that we get both right. More importantly, I think this is something that I think we often overlook. Is the basic to come up with what we call the honor code. Right, many students, may not be aware that there's certain things which are not proper. I think Stella talked about plagiarism. Many students before they come to the university, where they are in high school, they are used to getting information content and put it into the report. And maybe in school was acceptable, but when it comes to the university, we need to talk about academic integrity, right? What does it mean? You cannot just copy a part of content that is not yours as yours. You need to do citation. Right. So we also need to get our students to understand the honor code, so that when they work remotely, they know what are the do's and don'ts. And that is part of the big picture that we need to consider when we go into remote assessments.
Yeah, perfect. I think what you're saying there is the need for that honor code and for students to understand it, and understanding what the do's and don'ts, as well as creating a culture where academics can begin to reimagine and rethink how they've done assessments in the past. Stella, I know you were about to respond to that question. Would you like to share your thoughts on that same question? What are the main challenges to designing authentic assessment?
Well, sorry. It's in Indonesia, if I've told you before, this is the new thing for this country as well. So the main challenges for me personally is how to build the new culture of teaching and learning for all stakeholders by integrating pedagogy and technology. The second one is how to improve the digital literacy competences for educators and students as a digital natives in this digital era. And the third one is how to integrate the generation gap between educators and the students. Since in Indonesia, 71.2% educators aged 46 until 60 years old by 2019, while the students are all millennials. I think Generation X, as an educator, speaks different language with millennials as a students. So it makes the relevance of the real world definition, real world criteria for define the authentic learning, authentic assessment itself differ both parties. And another challenges, I think, for the prosperous demography that Indonesia belongs, the infrastructure in terms of network equality is a quite big challenge for Indonesia at this time.
Okay, all right. It appears that the challenges differ according to region. So I'm curious to hear from Tosh. In terms of Japan, what are the main challenges to designing authentic assessment?
I'd say the main thing is all the professors and instructors needs to be aware that this pandemic is the only a beginning of the change to a new educational normal. As you know, the freshmen today will face the singularity, which is on the 2045 or so. The freshmen today will be close to 50 years of age, and then they will experience the even harder situation than the pandemic of today. So the educators now needs to be responsible for the education evolved around the authentic learning, as Stella said, and authentic learning and also its associated authentic assessments. And in addition, the educational paradigm needs to be shifted so that we cannot just rely on the traditional education that we have enjoyed in the past before a pandemic. Okay, so biggest challenge is the changing the mindset of the professors who are dedicated at this point.
Perfect. So in a nutshell there, you've just mentioned that it's a mindset shift in terms of how we've done things in the past to what we currently want to term as authentic assessment. And what I'm also hearing that across the different territories or different regions, there are different challenges. So my next question, I think I'll probably start this question out with Dan. In the current climate of a pandemic, I know in addition to authentic assessment, the needs to grade it. How have institutions pivoted to support staff and students with administration and grading remote assessments?
Okay, when it comes to grading, I think that is a very good question. Because if the grading is done wrongly, meaning that the faculty may not be familiar with what they're actually looking for, then it will cause a problem. In other words, what they grade and what should be graded, there's a gap. So let me give you an example. If we say that one of the grading, as Hamish has mentioned, the soft skills, which are now getting important, critical thinking, communication, presentation. those are part of the assessment that need to be included in the rubric, if you like. How they communicate their presentation. Now, when it's done in an authentic assessment mode, does that mean that it will be written work? If it's written assignments, then that's straightforward because many of us are familiar. But if now the authentic assessment includes the component whereby students need to do a presentation, then that should be very clear as part of the outcomes that is expected. And of course, when we go into such mode of assessment, we can also ask ourselves, what else do we want to consider? Because today, employers are looking for more than just discipline and technical knowledge of our students. We want our students to be able to present, to work as teams, to be able to be creative, elements which are outside the syllabus. Right, our syllabus have been focused on rush of content, but employers are looking for not just what you know, but how you do, your purpose, your ethics, the way you work with other people. Right, so we need to incorporate that into the assessment, and it is an area that faculty may not be too familiar with. To many, it may be new. Right, that's number one. Number two is we can also consider peer assessment. Right, because when we get students working in group, we also want them, to be in a position whereby they exercise objectivity in a way they evaluate the teamwork, the contribution of different people. We also want them to exercise what we call critical thinking, not just of the way they think, but also the way that team members present. So, for example, where the team or other teams, when there are multiple teams, when they do presentation, we like them to be able to also, give an indication of what they think they are doing, and we have gone in that direction. We have got students to award stars, 1 to 5 stars. If they think that the contribution is good, they give a 4 stars or 5 stars. If they think it's not so good or, below par, maybe 1 star. Right. So by having students involved, as well, it sort of raised the bar of what we call the level of integrity, because students know that when students are watching them, they tend to be more self-aware, that when they do the sharing or do the work, there is a level of integrity and, if you like, authenticity. Right? If it is their work, because you need copy and paste or they do not do their part, the team members will know. So those are the 2 main categories of assessment that I would say is a good starting point. Right, the assessment by the professor on the content, then into the way they work as an individual and as a team, and then for the peer in the group to do a peer assessment of the fellow colleagues, as well as the work of other team members as well. And so when you have the multiple modes of assessment, we are able to show a certain level of fairness, a certain level of objectivity, and it filter out a lot of noise as well, of friends giving, additional grades, things like that. That could be filtered out. You can't get rid of that, but that will be averaged down.
Yeah. So that's clarity of outcomes and some level of peer assessment. Hamish, would you have anything else to add to that question? How have institutions pivoted to support staff and students with administration and grading remote assessments?
Yeah, look, so the idea of grading needs to be seen as part of a much bigger thing. I mean, why are we grading and what are we grading? And until we actually stand back and redesign assessment and think, this is not just about opening up the head, pouring in knowledge and checking that the knowledge is inside the head. It's actually about checking that people can think, feel, and do the right things. And then if that's what we're really trying to test or determine, how do we actually get that proof of the person's competence and capability? And look, quickly we end up saying that the idea that assessment is a private thing between an instructor and a student, as it has been for so many years, and Daniel just spoke a little bit to this, that is so bizarre. When I do research or when I make a conference or a workshop contribution like this, it's all public. But when I do assessment, it's a private thing between my instructor and me. And Tosh said before, the biggest bottleneck here is faculty. We know that. We've studied that for 20 years. We can't wait for faculty to upskill or a whole generation of faculty to turn over. We must change now. It's just not enough. You know, the assessment practices we're using now might have been good in 1950, 1960, 2000, maybe even 2019. 2030, no, there's just far too many students involved. And the things we're testing are far too complicated and differentiated. The one key message here, and this is where the software helps, software will not solve the problems of education, but this is where software helps. It will help with collaboration. So assessment gets much more integrity because it's not just a private thing between me and my student. It's not just a private thing between me and my university. The tasks, the outcomes, the assessment can be done by so many different people. And of course, there are some implications if you have very secure test materials. Most test materials are not so secure in higher education. Have them openly and test people and have collaborative assessment. And if you like, then we're back to the grading practices, which are much, much stronger and much cheaper and much faster as well. So the traditional way of sort of opening up the head, pouring in the knowledge and having someone grade whether I can do it sounds bizarre when you actually start to think, well, we can actually have different forms of people and ideas and tasks, checking and authenticating my knowledge, skills and feelings, and checking that I'm doing things in the most capable ways. The collaboration that we've seen in so many other sectors of not just education, but the sharing economy globally, has yet to really touch assessment. It has touched curriculum, it has touched teaching somewhat, but it has yet to touch assessment. And it's that huge bottleneck that once we undo and we start to have much more sophisticated next generation forms of assessment, we will see a paradigm shift in education. I've worked with the biggest governments and the biggest universities in the world. They are all committed to it. This year has given us the chance for true progress.
You just did mention software there, so I think I'll probably just start the question with you. My next question is around technology's involvement with designing remote assessment. So how has technology, in particular educational technology, informed, guided, and supported the design of remote assessments?
Well, I'm going to have to start by saying, if you go onto palgrave.com and you look at higher education design, my book that's coming out in about 6 weeks, so we'll answer that question superbly, Chuck Whitty. But just in brief right now, it's been the case for the last 20 years that education technology, which by the way is completely undeveloped compared with fintech or medtech, but growing hugely fast, that is now an inseparable part of the education experience. Education has not been solved by technology. You know, just having an LMS doesn't do anything for education. And even Zoom or whatever other platform you're using this year for your delivery of education is really not the full breadth and depth of what the technology has promised to deliver for us. So we will still see technology going forward, and it will make the most progress in ways and areas where it's led by educational leaders and very clever scientists, people who design education and people who lead it well. And that's what we've seen this year, which is why we've had so much progress. You know, in Asia, at the start of this year, much of what we were doing in online learning, I wouldn't say illegal, but certainly far outside the regulatory and policy schemes that were in existence. That's changed now. And governments and huge universities, let alone parents of students, have seen that we can, with the integrity that has been mentioned by Dan, we can have good confidence in certain forms of online learning. So the technology will play a role, and EdTech is booming. And it's a great time to be thinking about how to creatively use technology in teaching and learning. But technology is not the answer. Good educational design is the answer. And if we just have technologies that reward the flip top head view of learning, it's taken us back 100 years. It may sound like smart stuff, but really it's not advancing teaching and learning. So the technology will play a role, but only when it's led well. And that's exactly what we're starting to see this year.
Excellent. Tosh, I'd like to get your take on the same question as well. Have you got the same views or a contrary view? Professor Tosh?
Yeah. Hamish mentioned everything what I wanted to say. But what I can add is the one thing, and be, because due to the technology, advanced technology, okay, we were able to overcome the difficulties during the pandemic through the online education. This spring semester, we are forced to convert all the in-class instructions to online over 6,000 courses on campus. So the without technology, we were not able to do that. When the first internet came in through the telephone, wired modem, and we were not able to conduct the same thing through the remote education as we did in half a year ago. So the technology is important, but as Hamish mentioned, okay, that doesn't contribute much about the quality of the authentic assessment. Okay, that belongs to the professors and also the students with the active learning mind in mind. That's what I wanted to add.
Perfect. In a nutshell there, what I'm hearing is pedagogy before technology, not technology before pedagogy. Thanks for sharing that. We're just going to move along now, and I think we'll start with Stella. Stella, what would you recommend as key elements that make for successful delivery of authentic assessment? We talked about grading, we talked about design. Now let's say we've got live course. What are the key elements that make for successful delivery?
Well, I think I'm gonna start with the digital literacy. Digital literacy will be very needed for both students and educators. They really have to be smart in using the technology in this digital era, in finding the right information and so on. And the second one, it's really important too, is ICT skills. So everyone, like Hamish and Prof already speak about how to use the technology. Yeah, in this era, I think both students and educators need to shift the paradigm to adopt the technology in terms of teaching and learning activities. And the third one is this is really challenging to integrate between pedagogy and technology. And the last one is the communication skills, because I have experienced a lot of things that cannot be communicated well. So there are misunderstanding, misleading, and bad experience about online learning just because the instructor cannot communicate their expectation in learning outcomes to the students.
Thank you.
That's for
just summarize. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I say that there are 4 elements that I have mentioned as a key elements.
Yeah, perfect. Dan, have you got any other elements to add to this to that question?
Yeah, I think thanks to technology, we are able to have something that we never were able to do before, and that is full participation of the whole class. So imagine, as an example, if I teach a class, I can only talk to one student at a time, right? But when I use technology, I'm able to get all students to input into their devices or into whatever it is, right? And then they're able to show what they have done, right? So that is a very powerful advantage, of using simple technology to get all students to be involved and to move at the same pace at the same time. Now, one step beyond that, now the students are able to participate equally, simultaneously. The next part is to do what we call peer assessment, right? And so students are able to see, what other students in the class have done. And we have done that. We have, like I said, get students to do peer rating, peer assessment of their contribution relative to other people. And when and when we do that, the students start exercising what we call critical thinking, and judgment, right? Because I know the subject, all right? And when I look into other students' contribution, I'm able to judge and contribute. And very often, some students realize, hey, now I see the guy is able to do or to present the same answer but in a better way. And because of that, you are able to say he has done better, and hence I'm able to critique and judge him better. And for somebody else, they say that this person, his answer is not so good. And by so doing, through this peer assessment, by, as I said, awarding stars, minimum 1 star, we want students to have empathy. So minimum 1 star, and better ones, more stars. So what will happen is that the good students will float to the top, and the students with less stars will float to the bottom. And so those students become what we call model answers. They are able to model the right way to respond to a question. And the students are able to learn from them, those people. And then for those who are rated lowly, using such an approach, that's why faculty says, okay, these are the students who really need help, right? And so help is given to those who need it, and recognition is given to those who are able to demonstrate understanding and application. And those in the middle, they know how to swim to the top, right? So that is one a powerful way of using technology to get returns that was not possible previously in the traditional, face-to-face environment.
Okay.
Right. So that is important. And the other one to add is this: if we want to use technology, whatever you do, it must be professor friendly.
Okay, got it.
If the technology is not professor friendly, right, then you lost. Right. And professor friendly means that it's easy for them to apply, easy for them to adopt in a sustained manner throughout the whole curriculum. It's easy for them to be assured that the system works. It will not fail them. It will not crash. It will not break down.
Yeah. Thank you. Now let's move a little further and look at how because part of this conversation is measuring success. Hamish, in a hypothetical world, we're looking at really great or well-designed assessments. And part of the process in testing or iterating or administering assessment is measuring success. So my question is, how can educators measure the success of assessment design? And what role, if any, does student feedback play in this process? Hamish.
Look, as I say, I'm going to come back to it again, next generation assessment, it's all about the quality of the assessment infrastructure and being able to do that. Completely agree with what Daniel said. The best ideas that no one likes are wasted ideas. So it's got to be easy. Faculty, no one likes grading. We already talked about grading. No one likes doing grading. I've yet to meet any faculty around the world who sits down on a Saturday evening and instead of watching a film, enjoys grading their exams. Even if they love their students and their teaching, it's probably the least favorite part of anyone's teaching job. So it's got to be easy for the faculty. So it's all about the redesign of the assessment. Now, when it comes to actually measuring success, having good quality materials and making sure that we have confidence in the reliability and the validity, again, the measurement science piece, is absolutely essential to having confidence in the quality of the data or the student results. There have been many attempts over the last 20 years, maybe 21 years, to try and have one global test. And there's still some tests going on. Actually, what really matters to understanding student success is the hundreds of millions of students at the 20,000 or so universities and the tens of millions of faculty all around the world are every day making their lives better by doing good quality assessment. That's what industry wants. That's what students want. That's what teachers want themselves. And if we can somehow increase the rigor and the integrity of the assessment materials and processes, we can have much better confidence in that. We may then start to not need certain other things like licensing exams and the like, because we will have more confidence in the product of the higher education itself. That's quite radical. but already we see some fields where that's happened. So making sure that we have confidence in the quality of the assessment process, not sort of bolting on additional forms of data, is absolutely essential. And look, quite honestly, people value what's valued. And if we have ranking systems, if we have presidents who care about assessment and student outcomes, if we have universities and faculty and parents who are all interested in student success, we will see even bigger growth in assessment, quality and integrity than we've seen this year.
Okay. So we're hoping to move into the space where we have better quality assessment. What I'm keen to learn from, this question goes to all the panelists, but I'll start with Stella. What lessons have we learned from the sudden move to remote learning that will influence how we design courses and assessments?
Well, the lesson is, as educators, we have to be flexible, yet keep maintaining the quality of teaching and learning process. In this digital era where we live now, it is nonsense if we don't shift our paradigm about adopting the technology in education sector. But we do really have to remember that technology will not replace the great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. That's the lesson that I think we should learn from this pandemic and this shifting.
Great. Professor Tosh, what are some lessons we've learned from how we've done things during this pandemic?
Okay, one thing is we cannot change the educational paradigm so quickly. That's one thing we learned, and we're not ready, and most of the professors are not ready to shift from the traditional assessment to authentic assessment. That's the important thing. And also I like to talk about as Hamish mentioned, about the validity part of the authentic assessment. Okay. We've been focusing on so much on the students' talents, and even when students are hired by companies, they're hired by the talents. But from now on, after the new normal era, we need to nurture the skills to solve various problems using the future skills such as critical thinking and transdisciplinarity mindset, and so this is also, as Hamish claimed, that we need a big paradigm shift. We cannot just stay in the realm of traditional education to bring about the authentic assessment success. Okay, those are the 2 points I like to mention.
Excellent. Dan, are there any lessons what you'd like to add that you've learned that would inform how we design?
Definitely. The traditional pathway, of university education as educators has been focused on what we call teaching quality. So we train our faculty to teach, to deliver. We have certain feedback, and then we give to content. So the focus was on teaching quality. And I think this opportunity of COVID, has caused us to rethink. Perhaps there's something beyond teaching quality. And I like to posit that what we should be looking into as well, and let that become our, if you like, our lighthouse, is to focus on learning quality. Right? How do we do whatever we need to do in a way that will enhance learning? Right? So it's not so much of what you have or how you teach, but what can you do so that students will learn. So in other words, instead of saying that today this is what I'm going to teach the class, by the end of the lecture, this is what they will know, A, B, C. The question is, If I want our students to understand ABC, what can I do so the students will learn? Right? And I think this is the new pedagogy whereby we move truly move into what we call a learner-centric design, where we ask ourselves, what can we do so the students will learn? Right? And by so doing, use whatever you need, good work, individual student, participation, peer assessment, to measure those outcomes. Right? The shift has moved more and more into learning outcomes rather than just content itself. And I think the World Economic Forum, when they talk about the work skills that employers are looking for, most of the expectations for employers, right, is on the soft skills. And I think part of the theme of today's session is to talk about being job ready. Because ultimately, if the student graduate and they can't get a job, then I think we need to rethink what and how we do. Right. So we need to get students to not just be taught the discipline, advanced knowledge, but also on the soft skills of teamwork, presentation, communication, conflict resolution, application of knowledge, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Hamish, have you got anything else to add to these lessons we've learned about the course of the year?
I get asked that a lot, Chuck Woody, and I've written several pieces, including for the wonderful Times higher education newsletter. And the short answer is, I think it's too soon to tell what's going to stick and what's going to go back. One thing we do know is we've all seen the future before our eyes in terms of technology's role in higher education. And just as Tosh said, unless the faculty change, nothing's going to change. At the same time, in about January, February, March this year, when pretty much all of Tsinghua's learning was shifted into the cloud, we saw, and we've evaluated this, and we're about to do further evaluation with all the faculty and students at the university, we saw that we had inadvertently given all the faculty an opportunity to learn about teaching and learning with technology, that even at a very prestigious engineering university, they might have still been using very traditional methods. So the faculty have had an eye-opener, I think, and the technologies are now there. How do we combine the management science, the measurement science, and the technology to really improve education? That's what a lot of people are working on very quickly and very well now, and just trying to make sure that some of that sticks, and really we're not still doing assessment in the same way in 12 months' time than we were doing it 12 months earlier. I think that would be a missed opportunity. And what we have seen with teaching and curriculum and all sorts of other student management softwares and practices in the last couple of decades, we will start to now see in assessment. We haven't even talked today about things like blockchain technology, but that's there as well. That's all part of the edtech ecosystem with billions of dollars being invested. So how that is taken forward, I think, is serious stuff that the world's university presidents are currently giving consideration to. And I hope they can persuade their faculty to join, because otherwise we'll be letting down the students and, quite frankly, the professions and the countries that fund higher education. Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes. I'm just going to quickly check to see if we have any question. Okay, the question is, this is from Krista Geraldine, and it says, which innovations, and I think I'll get Stella's thoughts on this question. Which innovations do you think will still be used in 10 to 15 years time?
We cannot predict actually, but yeah, actually, because the technology keep moving every day rapidly, and yeah, so I think in the 10 until 15 years from now, I can imagine like virtual lab perhaps for the practical courses that is now challenging. And well, for me personally, I can imagine in 10 until 15 years old after now, I can see the access for the higher education can be enjoyed by everyone, even in the remote areas, by the technology. That's all from me, Chuck.
That's good. There's another question from the crowd. I'm just looking at the time, we've got 4 minutes. It says, I think they're alluding to the fact in the next 1 to 5 years, will institutions revert to pre-pandemic behavior or practice? I would like Tosh's opinion on this.
Okay, would you repeat the question again? It was kind of choppy, sorry.
It says in the next 1 to 5 years' time, will institutions revert to pre-pandemic behavior or practices?
Oh, that's a good part. After experiencing the pandemic and online education during the pandemic, most professors are realized we cannot just simply go back. And we had a big survey going on after the online education, and they still feel that the educators' education must change. They started to realize, and then they are now moving toward the how to improve the quality of online education. Okay, not just not just to improve the quality of the traditional education. They stopped talking about that, and then it's the technology. Everybody's now realized, how technology is important to overcome such difficulties during the pandemic. So they are now thinking technology. It's technology-centered education. So their mindset is beginning to shift. Okay, so in 5 years, that's a long time, but we can see the results of that. Okay, so the quality of education will change in a better way, I hope.
That's actually really good to hear that we're going to be moving to an era where the quality is improving. On that note, I'd like to say a big thank you to my panelists. I want to acknowledge your insights, your expertise, and your experience in talking about authentic assessment for remote learning, the best practices for designing and measuring success. I know we didn't scratch the surface on the topic, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to start having a conversation. And I'd like to say thank you to the Times Higher Ed for putting together this amazing panelists and for the opportunity to serve. My name is Chukudi, and I wish you all a great rest of the day.